It's one more recap here. Today, I'll be going to recap the Has Fallen franchise, including Olympus Has Fallen, London Has Fallen, and Angel Has Fallen. The first movie, Olympus Has Fallen, opens with the United States President Benjamin sparring with his head of security, Mike, in a friendly boxing match on a Christmas night. Afterwards, Benjamin heads to his wife, who gets him ready for a fundraiser event. Benjamin, his wife, and their son Connor leave for the fundraiser together, but Connor chooses to sit with Mike and the security in their separate car since he takes great interest in Secret Service agents. Benjamin and his wife enjoy their privacy and exchange Christmas gifts in their limousine. That night, a tree falls over the security car ahead of Benjamin's limousine. The car slips and causes the president's limousine to lose balance and teeter. Before it falls off the bridge, Mike manages to pull Benjamin out of it right before the falling. The wife and the security guards die in the crash, haunting everyone present at the bridge for life. The scenes are then cut to 18 months later, where Mike is seen waking up next to his wife Leah. That morning, Mike keeps up with the news telecast of Benjamin's meeting with the South Korean Prime Minister on his TV, but his wife gets upset for not paying attention to her. Mike gets ready and visits Ms. Jacobs, the director of the Secret Service agency. Through their conversation, we find out Mike was demoted to being a desk officer at the Treasury Department after the bridge incident because he was too traumatized. As she tells Mike to get back to the real world and move on, Benjamin's security, who are workers from the Secret Service agency, show up for a visit and send him good wishes. When Mike sits back in his car to leave for work, the bridge incident haunts him once again. Meanwhile, Benjamin leaves his son to attend a meeting with his party at the White House, where the speaker, Trumbull, brings to his attention that the South Korean Prime Minister wants the American army to scare away the North Koreans from their border and prevent a nuclear attack. The Secretary of Defense, Ruth, suggests not taking any military action since it can trigger a nuclear war. When the Korean Prime Minister Lee shows up at the White House with his head security, Park, an intruder air jet enters their air zone without a warning and rains chaos by firing at the public in the park near the White House. Benjamin and Lee are escorted by their guards to bunker deep under the White House. Mike sees the aircraft from his workspace and runs towards the White House. Now, the imposter aircraft targets the White House security and shoots all of them, so the military sends their aircraft to take down the enemy. They shoot a missile at the imposter's tail and cause it to hit the Washington Monument and crash down in the park. While the president is reported of the crash down, a large group of terrorists surrounds the area and tries to get to the White House. Mike shoots two of the terrorists wearing their bomb jackets, while the security shoots fire at the terrorists and fails miserably. Benjamin worries sick when he finds out their ground has been breached, so he orders to alert the CIA, Pentagon, and other forces. Jacobs and other personnel join the military and send their troops to the White House. Meanwhile, the security head Park and one of the Secret Service's agents, named Forbes, turn out to be the traitors who shoot down all the security and take Benjamin and other secretaries as their hostages. Mike shoots down some terrorists and makes his way towards the front door, from where the remaining Secret Service agents walk out to tackle the terrorists. But they fry all of the agents like popcorn by using a machine gun planted inside a giant truck. They then missile the opening in order to get inside, but Mike sneaks in before them and watches the psychopaths shoot the already dead agents before taking over the entire White House. As they take over the security and grant access to the girl inside the bunker, working for the bad guys, she immediately cuts all kinds of communications and initiates an external lockdown. Mike's friend and a Secret Service agent named Roma reports the fall to Jacobs before dying. The military troops finally show outside the White House and prepare for a plan. Simultaneously, Park, whose real name is Kang, conference calls the military and shoots the South Korean Prime Minister in front of them and threatens to shoot Benjamin next. Afterwards, Forbes takes pleasure in tying up Benjamin and the other hostages. On the other hand, when the bad guys cut power, Mike takes over the security room and shuts off surveillance footage, which locks the bad girl out of the security systems. Now Kang speaks with Benjamin for the first time, revealing his ulterior motive, which is to make America spineless so it crawls out of Korean conflict and allows Kang to unite North with South Korea, which South Koreans find threatening. Benjamin spirals out of control when he hears Kang ordering Forbes to find his son. Mr. Speaker joins Jacobs in the military base, where they make him the acting president on Benjamin's behalf and give him protection. Mike makes his way to the president's office, from where he uses his emergency phone to contact Jacobs. While the military doubts him for being a part of the terrorist group, Jacobs vouches for him, saying he's an ex-battalion who would rather die than betray his country. Mike alerts them about the bombs the terrorists have rigged all entrances and windows with, so no one can come inside. He also asks about Connor, and finds out he's still inside the building. Meanwhile, Kang calls the military once again and orders them to pull out their troops from Korea, or else he'll kill everyone present in the bunker. He then blackmails one of the secretaries to get 1 out of 3 passcodes to the Cerberus. When the military finds out about the code leak, they tell Mike about it, revealing Cerberus to be a classified military protocol that allows the access to destroy any kind of nuclear launch. The access code was split into 3 and given to 3 different members of the White House, including Benjamin, who are all currently present and being held hostage in the bunker. Mike realizes the terrorists are looking for Connor so they can blackmail Benjamin into spilling the code and head straight to finding Connor. Meanwhile, Kang catches a glimpse of Mike in their last footage, so he gets Forbes to shed details on him and sends his commandos to find Mike, who hides from them like a ghost and finds Connor hiding in the walls. Kang has studied the White House's structure in detail, so he figures Mike is hiding in the walls and reports this to his commandos, who are looking for Mike. The commandos open their fire in the wall's direction, so Mike runs out of there while covering for Connor. He brings him to a chimney-like vent, from where he sends him outside of the White House and alerts Jacobs, so she can send army men to get Connor. A terrorist follows them and finds Connor climbing up the vent, but Mike takes care of him. Once the army rescues Connor, they report it back to the military base, where everyone praises Mike and counts on him to rescue the president. While Mike moves ahead, the acting president broadcasts a message on TV to calm the threatened public. Meanwhile, Mike secretly captures 2 of the rookie terrorists and tortures them into spilling Kang's name and the number of people he has in his army. When Mike delivers this news to Jacobs, the people at the base finally trace Kang, a globally wanted terrorist. The army general becomes overconfident after finding Mike has taken down most of Kang's men. He insists on sending his army inside to capture Kang, but Mike buys a few more minutes to recon the perimeter first. In that time, Kang finally speaks to him through comm, during which Mike reveals Connor has been sent out safe and sound. Kang pulls the ultimate move by bringing up his wife, but Mike hangs up. Hence, he sends Forbes to capture Mike. Left behind, Kang beats the secretary Ruth and gets the second code of the Cerberus from her. When Forbes and Mike collide, Forbes pretends to be innocent and unaware of the situation. But as soon as Mike suspects him, he attacks Forbes and kills him in an instant. Before dying, Forbes admits he'd lost his way and helps Mike by telling Kang he's killed Mike, so Kang doesn't send more men after him. The army general and the acting president check the aerial view of the White House and strategize sending their men from the rooftop via air transportation. Mike follows the terrorists and comes across a place where they've stashed advanced military weaponry, certainly stolen from the American military. He immediately tells Jacobs to abort the mission, but the stubborn general refuses to. This ends up bad when the terrorists put up an automatic machine gun against the choppers, which fries them with unlimited rounds. Mike shows up with a missile and blows up the machine gun, but 2 helicopters crash in his direction. He breaks through the roof and falls multiple stories down. The second plane explodes during the crash and blows up half of the White House. Kang calls the military base once again, shoots one of the secretaries, and repeats to fulfill his demand within an hour, or else Benjamin will be next. Now badly injured, Mike is directly ordered by the army general to stand down and wait for rescue. But Mike cusses at him and refuses to take orders from him. The acting president also raises his voice at him and tells Mike he's going to give up and call back the troops from Korea, but Mike suggests not surrendering yet since he assures he can still take down Kang. Before his final mission, he calls his wife at the hospital and makes sure she's safe, while hiding from her everything he's been up to. Next, he goes back to the security room and talks to Kang through a live broadcast, in which he confidently tells him to prepare to die by his hands. Mike also locks them out of the systems, so they don't bother the military base anymore. Kang makes his next move by humiliating Secretary Ruth and taking her outside the house. He lets her walk towards the army and tries to shoot her from behind, but Mike shoots at him from the staircase behind them, which lets Ruth run to the army and be rescued. Kang and his men run back to the bunker. With that, the time window closes, so the acting president orders to withdraw their troops from the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea and sends Kang a chopper just as he demanded. Kang's men suit up in black gowns and make their way out. Mike and the army are waiting to strike them and save Benjamin, but when they can't locate the president because of the disguise, they let them flee on the helicopter, which the military has bugged with a tracking device. Unfortunately, the helicopter explodes mid-air. While the news declares the president dead and America in its darkest hour, Mike has a hard time believing Kang, who had a bigger agenda, would depart like this. He figures Kang is still in bunker with Benjamin, so he plans on staying inside and rescuing Benjamin. His guess turns out to be true when we see Kang getting Benjamin to spill the third code of the Cerebrus and activating the deterioration of all the nuclear weapons within their silos, which will destroy the land and kill millions of people. Kang blows a hole into the wall and tries to escape through the secret tunnels, but Mike is already waiting for them there. As they open fire at each other, Kang shoots Benjamin in the stomach and engages in an overwhelming combat with Mike, which Mike wins in the end by sticking Kang's knife in his brain, ultimately killing him. He now goes to tend Benjamin's gunshot, but he alerts him of the activation of the Cerebrus. Mike contacts the military base and takes their help in deactivating the Cerebrus the last second, which saves America. He brings Benjamin out and hands him to the paramedics, where Connor and Leah are waiting for them. The film ends with a fully recovered Benjamin giving his speech on the rise of America and thanking those who saved America without being under the spotlight. The second movie, London Has Fallen, start with the live footage of a terrorist attack in Punjab, Pakistan, which has killed hundreds of innocents in Punjab. As the local government refuses to take any kind of action against it, the Western intelligence agency takes quick notice of the bombing and finds out Amir, the top-class notorious terrorist, is behind it. They show no mercy and initiate a drone strike at Amir's house amidst his daughter's wedding after seeing him as a potential threat. Scenes are then spun to the film's protagonist, Mike, 2 years after Amir's death. He's on a jog with the president, Benjamin, who openly discusses what name Mike's going to give to his soon-to-come baby. Mike returns home that day to his pregnant wife, Leah, who's setting up 6 cameras in the room they're preparing for the baby, just to feel safe. Now that he wants to focus on family, he types a resignation letter to retire from the White House. Meanwhile, Ben receives the death news of England's Prime Minister and calls Mike for their next mission to attend the funeral in London. Meanwhile, the Joint Security Committee, formed by the higher-ups from all across the world, is seen discussing the deceased Prime Minister's funeral arrangements and making a list of the worldly leaders who are to attend the funeral. Back in the White House, Mike and his boss, Jacobs, strategize how they're going to escort Ben to England at the funeral. Once done, Mike reaches back home and says goodbye to Leah before departure. On their flight, Jacobs catches up with Mike and stands by his decision to retire to prioritize his family. The following morning, Scotland's Yard Chief, Kevin, prepares his security staff to be on high alert during their service, since it's a big day to be noted in history. Ben, Mike, and Jacobs also safely land at an airport near London. Up next, the news shows how strictly the funeral cathedral is being secured by rangers, sniper guys, and air patrol. Back to the leads, their chopper lands in London for the funeral, where the German Chancellor has first shown up to Buckingham Palace, while several other prime ministers are seen making their way to the palace via different kinds of transportation. Just when the Americans show up at the palace to pay their condolences, a terrorist mob disguised as cops lets a vehicle pass the security check, which has a bomb attached under it. As the car explodes near the palace, the English guards go berserk and start shooting the public, during which the German Chancellor gets shot. Simultaneously, many disguised cops and terrorists surround the place and start shooting the security. Simultaneously, huge explosions occur on the London Bridge, the cathedral, and in the sea, killing 3 prime ministers of different countries. Back in the palace, Mike calls backup and flees with Ben and Jacobs, but one terrorist eyes their car and alerts the others. They chase them in a police car and multiple heavy bikes. Mike shoots as many as he can, but they open fire from all 4 directions, due to which their driver gets shot to death. Mike takes the wheel, cleverly dodges the terrorists, and successfully gets Ben and Jacobs back to their chopper. While the British reporters broadcast the horrors of the terrorist attack in London, we see Amir well and alive in Yemen, getting the attack updates from the man who works for his son, Kamran, who was behind it. From his base, Kamran's amputated pal cuts power in the city and blows Chief Kevin's yard tower to cut surveillance. Leah and her mother become shocked to see the news and immediately call Mike, but his number is out of reach. Trumbull, now the vice president, joins the Joint Chief Commission and its chairman to turn on their satellite to get surveillance of London, where Mike, Jacobs, and Ben are contradicting each other's assumptions regarding the purpose of the terrorist attack. Their eyes pop out of their socket when one of their 2 security choppers is blown by a missile mid-air. Mike spots multiple stakers on the building's rooftops carrying missile bazookas. They try to dodge them, but the stakers blow the second security chopper and at last, Ben's chopper, which crashes instead of blowing. Ben and Mike survive, whereas Jacobs gets injured and dies before ordering Mike to make the terrorists pay. Since all their security is dead, The two rum away alone just before the terrorists show up on their dirt bikes to inspect their chopper. Back in America, one of the chiefs finds Amir's recorded message, which he has uploaded all over the world, complaining about tired of being belittled and damaged by the Westerners, and announces that he's rising against them. Simultaneously, Amir personally calls them and threatens them to hand the United States president to him, or else he'll strike more terrorist attacks, claiming their blood will be smothered all over the Americans' hands that way. Trumbull bluntly denies his request and hopes to find Ben and Mike before Amir does. Meanwhile, Mike and Ben head back to the city and subdue a police officer, knowing he's a disguised terrorist. Mike steals all his ammunition and decides to take Ben to the safe house he has in London by chance. The two reach the subway station, where a large number of terrorists come after them. Mike fogs up the entire station by activating a gas bomb and ambushes them one by one. By the end of it, he hears Cameron trying to reach out to his lead man, Raza, on his comm. Mike beats Raza and speaks to Cameron from his comm, telling him to pack up and leave, but Cameron reveals the worst is yet to come. Trumbull and the chiefs finally find Mike and Ben from the surveillance provided by their satellite, since London's communications have been cut and the cops are rigged, which is why Ben couldn't reach them himself. Currently, Ben orders Mike to kill him if the situation blows out of proportion, because he doesn't want his son and the Americans to see their president die at the hands of terrorists. Up ahead, Chief Inspector Kevin calls Trumbull and lets him know that their prime minister was poisoned and assassinated, and updates on the cops being rigged. Trumbull realizes it was all a setup to gather the Western leaders at one place to take revenge for what they did to Amir. Now Kevin decides to involve the military to evacuate the civilians before London turns into a war zone. Mike and Ben finally reach the safe house, which turns out to be his old colleague's house from MI6. She picks up a frequency coming from Trumbull on her laptop, who confirms that he's located them and has already sent a search team that will extract them from the American embassy. The colleague pulls a file on Amir and reveals he's behind it, which makes Ben realize he's attacking the Westerners because of the drone strike that killed his daughter at her wedding. The colleague fails to get any surveillance of the city since the terrorists have infiltrated it. As their last resort, Ben and Mike sit down and wait for the search team. The colleague's boyfriend spots a team outside their apartment building and calls Mike. Mike immediately spots the difference between the guns they're holding and figures they're disguised terrorists who've been keeping tabs on them. Mike loads himself with his friend's guns, gives one to Ben, and sends him into hiding with his friend while he stays back to fight the entire team. He successfully takes out every one of them, but the last one takes him under his gunpoint. Surprisingly, Ben comes out and shoots the last person. As they flee in their colleague's bulletproof car, the colleague shows up at the yard's tower and raises concerns about someone from within their group being a double agent. Simultaneously, the Americans find out Kamran's hideout place and update it to Kevin. Ben drives the car and decides to head to the embassy, but they're ambushed by Kamran's army. They launch multiple missiles and infinite gunshots at the car, but they're protected by the bulletproof car. At last, a truck crashes into their car, allowing the terrorists to pull out Ben from the crash and kidnap him. Mike shoots one of the guys and tortures him until he spills where they've taken Ben for his public execution online. The American search team also shows up and lets Mike join their quest to rescue Ben. Back in the yard, the colleague uses her skills to disable authorization codes and brings back the surveillance for Kevin. On the contrary, Ben is brought to Kamran, who smacks him for talking back to him. Mike and his search team show up outside Kamran's hideout, where Kevin reaches out to Mike to stand him down and let the military take over. But Mike refuses to take commands from him and begins his mission. Cameron's men show outside the building and open fire, but Mike and his search team roasts them and blow the building's power system from outside. Mike takes a good look at the building's blueprints on the team's tablet and hands his teammate the detonator of all the bombs they've planted in the building. He tells him to detonate the building on his command and climbs the building to get to Ben. Once inside, he puts on his night vision spectacle and makes his way through the basement. He shoots everyone who comes in his way and slowly makes his way towards Ben, who's being tortured by Cameron. His men tell Cameron to kill Ben right away, but he is fixated on the public execution. His men bring back the power and put Ben on live TV. The entire world watches Ben as he's about to be executed at the hands of the enemy, but Mike reaches just in time and shoots everyone. His gun runs out of ammo, so he engages in a physical fight with Cameron. Cameron's amputee pal blows up the place with his grenade before dying, but Mike saves Ben. Cameron also runs away, so the duo steals some guns and make their way out. Cameron and his men chase after them and open fire, but they engage in crossfire and shoot most of Cameron's men. When things blow out of proportion, Mike orders his buddy to detonate the place. The explosion becomes bigger when the gas pipelines explode. Ben and Mike jump down the empty elevator shaft, while Cameron dies in the explosion. When the team rescues Ben and Mike hands them a device, claiming it to be the missing link to trace Amir. Mike's old friend also finds the mole and shoots him. To show superiority, Trumbull calls Cameron in Yemen from Cameron's phone and alerts him of the second drone strike they're about to launch, in which Amir and all his men die. In the end, Mike unites with his wife and newborn son. He is about to send his resignation letter, but Trumbull's speech on the news changes his mind, and he deletes the letter. The final movie, Angel Has Fallen, opens with Mike, now known as the national hero for saving the world twice, returning to combat. He's geared up fighting off dozens of soldiers while a chopper is surrounding him. Mike makes it out of the building, but gets shot. It turns out it is just a combat practice. Mike is checking the combat layout of his old friend Wade Jennings. Afterward, Wade tells Mike he's the owner of a private security corporation known as Salient. It is staying afloat only through training contracts. Mike is heading home and invites Wade to meet his family for dinner someday. Mike heads home and secretly takes his pain medications. He greets his wife, Leah, who just put their daughter, Lynn, to sleep. The next morning, Mike secretly visits a doctor because he's been having migraines and feeling dizziness. Now, Mike is in the White House next to David, the director of the Secret Service, who is about to retire soon. They are escorting the president to a press conference. Vice President Alan Trumbull is now the current president of the United States. A reporter asks Alan if the White House is looking to recruit private contractors, but the president doesn't answer and dismisses the conference. He holds a meeting with his White House members, asking who leaked this information. No one talks except for the Vice President Kirby, who's backing up Alan. Back at Mike's house, Wade pays them a visit. He chats with the family and tells them stories of him and Mike when they were soldiers. Afterward, Mike shares that he's next in line to become the director of the Secret Service, but he's not prepared for it. He tells Wade that he'll put in a good word for Wade to select him as the director. The next morning, Mike leaves his house to meet the president for a secret fishing trip. Mr. President's security has secured the location while Mike and President Allen chat. The president wants Mike to become the new director of Secret Services because he can't trust anyone. Mike accepts, but he's panicking. He starts feeling dizzy again, so Allen dismisses him and calls in Murphy to look over Mr. President. On the other hand, we see a van pulling up and a mysterious person turning up the computers and launching dozens of drones. Mr. President's security notices the drones and wonders if they are bats. Mike realizes it's drones and alerts them to take cover and protect Mr. President. The drones start blowing up all of the security team and killing all of them, but spare Mike. Murphy pushes Mr. President in the water as a drone explodes their boat. Mike rescues Mr. President, but a drone blast knocks them unconscious in the water. Meanwhile, the people from the drone van flee the scene while leaving the van behind. President Allen and Mike are brought into a secure hospital, where David handles the situation. At the FBI, we meet Special Agent Helen Thompson, who orders the attack location to be secured for investigation. President Allen goes into a coma, so Vice President Kirby is brought in, who has to operate as the acting president of the country. The FBI arrives at the crime scene, while Leah arrives at the hospital with Lynn. David meets them and escorts them to a safe room. Mike now wakes up in the hospital, cuffed to the bed. Agent Helen meets him and questions him about the attack. She asks who Mike's working for because they found the drone van and it was covered with his DNA. Mike is shocked and tells her he is not a traitor. Helen also questions Leah and informs her that they found an offshore account under Mike's name, worth $10 million. Helen is convinced Mike orchestrated this attack since only he survived. Mike is arrested while Leah is free to go. She drives home as news reporters swarm her house. Meanwhile, Mike is being transferred to prison. On their way, they get followed by masked men who deactivate their engines electronically and attack their cars. The terrorists shoot all of the FBI agents guarding Mike and kidnap him. On their way in their car, Mike attacks them and shoots them with their gun, causing the car to crash into the trees. He gets out of the car and unmasks the terrorists, realizing they are all Salient guards, working for Wade. Mike escapes with their weapons, while the FBI discovers Mike has escaped. At the Salient compound, we see Wade talking to a person on call. Wade reveals how he tricked Mike by getting his DNA and hair sample by inviting him to his training practice. The mystery man orders Wade to eliminate Mike before he can expose them. At night, Mike now heads to a phone booth and calls Leah. He assures her he didn't do anything that he's accused of. He knows the FBI is listening to their call, so he tells them he won't stop until he proves who framed him. The FBI traces his call and alert the nearest cops. Meanwhile, 2 civilians notice Mike and hold Mike at gunpoint because they saw the news and figure there must be a reward for Mike. Mike quickly disarms them and steals their truck. The cops arrive and notice Mike in the truck. They pursue him while Mike tries to fend them off. Mike enters the forest, where the truck crashes. He quickly runs in the woods as the authorities continue their search for him. In the White House, acting President Kirby gets informed that Mike is working with the Russians because his offshore account links back to Russia. The president is pissed and wants to retaliate against Russia. Mike now steals a car while Wade and his men try to figure out where Mike could hide or regroup. Mike drives to the countryside, where he meets an old man living in the woods. The old man is Clay Banning, a former soldier who happens to be Mike's dad. Clay asks how Mike found him, so Mike reveals he's kept tabs on him ever since he became a soldier, years ago. Clay abandoned Mike and his mom in his childhood due to his mental stability, and Mike always hated him for it. Clay lives off the grid, so Mike decides to stay with him for a while. Clay writes all about his life on a typewriter so he doesn't forget, given he's getting very old and more insane. Later, President Kirby holds a press conference where he announces that Mike is working with the Russian government and has tried to assassinate President Trumbull. One of Wade's hackers finds out that Mike had been monitoring his dad throughout his career. They locate Clay, who's staying in West Virginia, so Wade sends his men to eliminate the father and son. At night, Clay wakes up Mike, informing him that Wade's men have found their way here. Mike decides to escape with Clay, but Clay is fully prepared. He takes Mike into a tunnel he dug that leads to the forest. Clay had planted bombs all over the forest because of his paranoia, and one by one he blew all of them. Mike takes out some of the men surrounding them, but Clay keeps on detonating his insane number of bombs. In the morning, Mike drags all the corpses to Clay's house to leave a message for the FBI. Mike uses their phone to call Wade. He confronts Wade and tells him he's coming for him. Clay and Mike leave the place in Clay's car on the highway. The FBI finds the camera footage from the highway, where Mike shows them the coordinates of Clay's cabin. At Clay's cabin, the FBI finds the dead bodies, and a message from Mike exposing Salient is behind this. Helen and her team start looking into Salient and Wade Jennings and decide to meet him. On the road, Mike decides to meet with President Trumbull to clear his name. He reveals to Clay that he has a wife and a daughter. Mike heads his own way to the hospital, while Wade gets new orders from the mystery man who is revealed to be President Kirby. Kirby wants Wade to eliminate Alan Trumbull before he wakes up so he can remain the president. Back at their house, Leah gets a visit from Wade's men, who want to extract her for Wade, but Clay arrives and rescues the mother and daughter. He apologizes for the violence and introduces himself to Leah as Mike's dad. Leah is suspicious he's lying, so Clay tells her Mike's birth name and his mom's maiden name. Now, President Allen wakes up, and David fills him in with what happened and how Mike betrayed them. Meanwhile, Wade and his men are analyzing the hospital where Allen is kept to assassinate him. Helen and her colleague approach the Salient compound and confront Wade. Wade realizes they're a threat, so he shoots both of them. They all head for the hospital while Mike arrives at the hospital. He steals a cop's uniform and diverts the other officers to a false attack so he can enter the basement. There, he holds a cop hostage and takes him to the president's suite. Upon arriving at the suite, Mike gets cornered by dozens of cops and demands to speak with David. David gets Mike cuffed and takes him to President Allen. Mike explains that he was set up by the Salient, and they are headed here to eliminate him. Allen believes him because Mike saved his life and orders everyone to listen to Mike. Mike checks all the security along David, but suddenly gas starts leaking in all of the hospital rooms. The nurse informs Mike that someone has infiltrated their gas system and they are leaking it. Mike realizes Salient is going to blow up the building, so they evacuate the entire hospital. Back in the White House, President Kirby has ordered airstrikes on Russia, while the White House members are advising against it since President Trumbull has woken up. Mike and David rescue President Allen in a car and drive away, but Wade and his team arrive and deactivate their communications. They corner them and start shooting at their car. Mike decides to move Allen to the building opposite the hospital. While entering the building, David gets shot in the leg. The Salient ignite the gas trigger and blow up the entire hospital. Meanwhile, Mike tells everyone in the building to escape from the back. Mike watches the building map and comes up with a strategy. Mike instructs the cops to build a barricade to shield the corner office, where he hides President Allen. Wade and his team now enter the building and start shooting, while Mike enters the hallways and sneakily kills Wade's men. Wade realizes more police will arrive soon, so they need to finish quickly, and calls in a helicopter for his escape. The president's security gets outnumbered and gets shot one by one. Wade and his team break into the corner office but find the president missing because Mike hid him in the next office to deceive Wade. Mike makes it up to Wade's floor and shoots his men while Wade heads to the roof. He beats his men and blows Wade's helicopter before he can escape. They both run out of ammo and get into a knife fight. Mike stabs Wade and defeats him. They both sit together as Wade bleeds to death. After some time, the nations are at peace as President Allen gets Kirby arrested. Clay is now visiting Mike's house, getting to know his family. Later on, Mike gives his resignation to President Allen, but he convinces Mike to become the new director of the Secret Services. In a post-credits scene, Mike tries a new therapy with his father to relieve their stress, and the movie ends here. I hope you enjoy the recap. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next recap.